When I was a child, my family lived in an old wooden house on the edge of a dense forest, a place no one ever wanted to visit. The house had passed through three owners, but after the last one mysteriously disappeared, it was abandoned. My parents bought the house at a bargain price, but I always felt there was something very strange about the place. One cold October evening, when my parents went out to attend a party and left me home alone, I decided to watch a horror movie on TV to pass the time. The wind howled outside the window, whistling through the cracks of the old house, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Around midnight, just as the movie reached its climax, I suddenly heard a loud creaking sound from the back of the house, like wood bending under pressure. I jumped up, eyes focused on the window, looking out into the pitch-black forest. Nothing. I told myself it was just the wind, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. About 10 minutes later, I heard the sound again, this time louder and more distinct. It came from the basement. I never liked going down there because the old wooden stairs creaked with every step, and the basement was always dark and damp. But my curiosity overcame my fear, and I mustered up the courage, grabbed a flashlight, and headed towards the basement door. I opened the basement door, and a cold gust of air hit me in the face. The creaking sound echoed again, closer this time, as if it were right beneath my feet. My heart raced as I shone the flashlight down the stairs. The steps led into deep darkness, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. It's probably just a rat, I thought, but I couldn't calm my nerves. Suddenly, a strong wind blew, slamming the basement door shut behind me, making me jump in fright. I decided to go down. Each step creaked loudly, as if the stairs might collapse under me. When I reached the bottom, I swept the flashlight across the room. There was nothing but old boxes and furniture that my family rarely used. I was about to turn back when I heard a whisper. A faint, raspy voice echoed from the corner of the room. I froze, my legs glued to the floor. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No one answered, but the whispering continued, coming from somewhere unseen. Then, from the darkest corner of the room, a small figure emerged, pale-faced with hollow eyes. It was a child about 7 or 8 years old, dressed in dirty, faded white clothes. "Who are you?" I screamed. The child said nothing, only stared at me as if waiting for something. Panic surged through me, and I ran up the stairs as fast as I could. But when I reached the door, my trembling hands couldn't seem to unlock it. The whispering behind me grew louder, like a chorus of voices rising in unison. I turned back and saw the child standing at the bottom of the stairs, his cold, emotionless eyes locked onto mine. In a moment of desperation, I pounded on the door with all my strength. When it finally swung open, I dashed outside, locking it behind me. But I didn't stop there. I ran straight out of the house, through the dark forest, never once looking back. When I reached the neighbor's house, panting heavily, I told them everything. They looked at me in disbelief, then told me something I will never forget. Over 20 years ago, a couple lived in that house. Their son disappeared in the basement, and no one ever saw him again. People say his spirit still lingers there, waiting for someone to find him. I never went back to that house. My parents thought I was just spooked by the horror movie I watched that night. But I knew for sure something terrifying is hidden deep within that old house, and that child is still out there, waiting. When I was 20, I moved out and lived alone in a small apartment in the suburbs. My apartment was located in a fairly quiet area where people rarely paid attention to each other. Despite that, I always felt safe because of the security system and the sturdy iron door leading to my apartment. One weekend evening, I was getting ready to go out with some friends when I received a message from an unknown number. The message simply said, "Be careful, I'm watching you." I immediately felt uneasy, but thought it was probably someone trying to prank me. I deleted the message and continued getting ready. After leaving my apartment and heading down to the ground floor, I suddenly had the feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around, but didn't see anyone. The entrance to the building was deserted, with only the dim street lights in the distance. I thought I was just imagining things, so I quickly walked to my car. That night, I went out for dinner with my friends at a restaurant downtown. We had a great time chatting, and for a while, I forgot about the unsettling message. But when I returned home around 11 p.m., the feeling of unease returned. I entered my apartment, locked the door tightly, and turned on all the lights. I checked my phone, and this time there was a new message. "I know you're home." I gasped, my heart racing in panic. I checked all the windows and doors to make sure they were locked, but the fear within me grew stronger. Someone knew where I was, knew my schedule, and was watching me. I tried to sleep, but couldn't, spending the entire night lying in bed with my phone in hand, anxiously waiting for something terrible to happen. The next morning, I decided I wouldn't let fear control me. I went to the local police station and reported the harassing messages. They said they would investigate and advised me to stay calm, as it could just be a prank from someone I knew. My life returned to normal for the next few days. No more messages, and I began to think it was all over. But one night, as I turned off the lights and prepared to sleep, I heard a soft knock at the door. The knocking was steady, slow, as if someone didn't want to disturb me too much, but still wanted me to know they were there. I stood still in the dark, too afraid to move. The knocking continued for what felt like an eternity, and then suddenly stopped. I slowly crept toward the door and looked through the peephole. Outside stood a figure wearing a black mask, silently waiting in the empty hallway. My heart pounded as he lifted his head, looking directly at the peephole, as if he knew I was watching. I stepped back, terrified, and called 911. By the time the police arrived, the masked man had disappeared. They searched the area, but found no trace of him. Afterward, they advised me to move out because they couldn't guarantee the man wouldn't return. But the story didn't end there. A week after I moved to a different apartment complex, I received a package delivered to my new address. Inside was nothing but a black mask, identical to the one the man had worn that night, along with a small note that read, "I still know where you are." I shuddered, realizing he wasn't going to stop. It happened when I was about 17, home alone because my parents were away on a business trip. I wasn't the type to be scared of mysterious things or easily frightened, but that night completely changed my perspective. Late at night, I sat in the living room, quietly doing homework with soft music playing in the background. The wind outside howled through the cracks of the old house, making eerie whistling sounds. Our family home was located outside of town, surrounded by only a desolate road and a thick forest behind. Everything was peaceful until the doorbell suddenly rang. I wasn't expecting anyone at this hour, so I froze when the bell rang. Glancing at the camera screen, I saw a middle-aged woman standing outside, wearing a thick coat with the hood up, standing silently. The cold wind swirled around her, and her appearance in the darkness, framed by the howling wind, only heightened the eerie feeling. I opened the small window above the front door and asked, "What do you need?" The woman looked directly at me with emotionless eyes and said, "I'm lost. Can I come inside for a bit?" Her request was simple, but her voice sent chills down my spine. My instincts told me not to let her in, so I reply, "I'm sorry, but I can't. You can go to the cafe nearby. They'll surely help you." The woman still stood there, not saying a word. A faint smile appeared on her face, but it didn't reach her eyes. She just stood there, staring at me for a long moment before turning and walking away, disappearing into the night wind. I sighed in relief and returned to the living room, trying to continue my work, but the unease lingered. About half an hour later, I heard tapping on the window at the back of the house. My heart skipped a beat. I had locked all the windows, but the sound was coming from the kitchen, where the glass door led to the backyard. I cautiously approached, pulling the curtain back, and saw the same woman. She stood in the backyard, tapping her fingers against the glass. That eerie smile was still on her face, but now she held something in her hand. My heart raced, and I shouted through the glass, "What do you want?" The woman replied in a cold whisper, "Open the door, I won't hurt you." Without hesitation, I yanked the curtain shut, ran back to the living room, and grabbed my phone to call the police. But to my shock, the screen displayed no signal. At that moment, the front door started banging loudly, as if someone was trying to break it down. I had locked the door securely, but the pounding reverberated through the quiet night like a threat. I gathered all my courage, ran upstairs, and locked myself in my bedroom. Sitting on the bed, I listened intently. The banging outside eventually stopped, and the house fell into complete silence, except for the wind. But I didn't dare leave my safe spot. After about an hour, I finally heard police sirens in the distance, and the noises outside died down. I don't know what happened next, but when the police arrived, they found no trace of the woman. The security camera at the front door didn't record anything either, even though I was certain I had seen her. A few days later, when my parents returned home, I told them everything, but they dismissed it, saying it was probably my imagination or a hallucination. Yet, since that night, I always feel like someone is watching me whenever I'm home alone. And every time the wind howls outside my window, I can still hear the faint whisper, "Open the door, ...